CT-1077, Personal Journal Entry 2, Touch of Malice. Okay, check this out. Shortly before I left to confront and subsequently eliminate Eris Morn that is, requested that if I were to survive the encounter with Oryx and in fact kill him, that I would bring her back certain relics from some of the fallen Exalted Hive, along with some other rare materials only found on the Dreadnought. Specifically, she requested the Blade of Famine from his War Priest, the Shroud of the Death Singer Iranuk, and the Ravenous Heart, something she said I would recognize once Oryx was dead. Sure, I had initial reservations about it, but she assured me that by bringing these components to her, she would be able to fashion a weapon unlike anything I'd ever seen. One that would be a really powerful advantage in any fight, so I figured, you know, what the heck? Sick weapon. I was going to be right there on the Dreadnought and kill all those people anyhow. At the time, it sounded like a really good idea. And although she does creep me out a good bit, I have to admit her advice and information has made it somewhat difficult not to trust her. I mean, really, given the little I do know about things, what makes her any less trustworthy than the others? You know, take into consideration the bleedy triple I thing she's got, whatever. Let's get real. Cade's a walking, talking, fully sentient, and highly sarcastic robot. Zavala's got those crazy glowing eyes, and I have no clue who or even what the speaker is yet. So let's just say normal in this day and age might be a bit more inclusive than what I remember. Anyhow, I never really put it together at the time, but now I understand each piece for what it was, as well as how it exists now. And I gotta tell you, I'm a little bit worried about what we did. Seriously, this isn't good. Let's take a look at the weapon and review what it does first. It's a fully automatic 11-round scout rifle, a fairly small magazine for that type of weapon. However, the 11th round not only regenerates, theoretically forever, it also deals substantially greater damage than the rest of the magazine. The data that I've uncovered seems to imply that the osmiums, the race that Oryx originally came from, were a vulnerable species that apparently lived really hard and fairly short lives. 10 years to be exact. So I guess it does make sense that the gun would have 10 rounds and then the 11th round would, you know, continue on infinitely. Sort of like a metaphor for Oryx's own lifespan. How cute. That last round, though, it comes at a cost. Every time this quote-unquote bullet is fired, it actually drains the wielder. I don't know how to explain it. You just feel weaker and weaker with every pull of the trigger, and if you do utilize its full auto capability, it makes it even worse. The only relief really comes from either stopping the attack and reloading the gun, or by effectively eliminating 3 targets in succession. And that latter doesn't just relieve the handler, no. It revives, it restores, it satiates. I still remember the first time I used it. It didn't look like much, but it had an eerie presence, specifically around the entity floating in the weapon's containment field. Here, let me show you something. Oh yeah, that thing's alive. Very much so, in fact. Let me show you. Watch the heart as the clip empties. The rune field strains to contain it. And you can actually see the field starting to get weaker until you get closer to that final round. Once you get past that and the field breaks, the entity's free. Watch the heart attack me as I fire it. Did you see that? Can you hear that? I'm doing my best to get the audio onto this recording. You can hear it, can't you? The voices. I have no fucking clue what's being said right now. Maybe Eris does, though. She's always going on about these voices. Maybe these are the ones she was referring to? It kind of makes me wonder why she would do this at all. What I found is that each piece of the weapon is there for a specific purpose. Reading through information in the grimoire has actually proved extremely informative, but it was a piece of data found in net communications that put the puzzle together for me fully, if you will. I'll leave a link below for the original thread of this material so that you can see it for yourself. It comes from a user named ClickSpaceBait, and it confirms something I myself had considered. Let's start with the Blade of Famine. This is retrieved from the War Priest encounter on the Dreadnought during the Orcs raid. You know, before I go any further, maybe I should explain where I'm getting my information from. The data that I'm telling you about right now is derived from the Dreadnought's calcified fragments. Within those fragments, there are verses to a text referred to as the Book of Sorrows. Now, I'm not sure if this is like a Bible thing or a constitution, if you will, but in this particular instance, it speaks of Orc's war priest as a kind of manager of the death tithings Orcs needed to feed his worm. I'll explain more about that in future transmissions, but to touch on it briefly for context, the information seems to imply that the source of Orc's power is a worm, but not like a, typical disgusting worm on the ground or something. Think of it more like an unrivaled dark presence that offers unlimited power to its host, essentially at the cost of everything they once were. Furthermore, it appears as if he had actually taken control of said presence after learning how it was manifesting its power. For what it's worth, apparently he also used to be a she, but we'll get into that at another time as well. Alright, listen to this. The fragment marked verse 3-4, the scream, says, "My siblings, we are betrayed. We will never live eternal. My worm's hunger grows faster than I might draw from it. We are bound by our covenant to obey our nature, eternal search, eternal cunning, eternal conquest. But as we do this, my siblings, we feed our worms, and the more we feed them, the hungrier they grow, faster and faster. Soon, my siblings, we will be so mighty and our worms so hungry, that not with all our might could we possibly feed them, and we will be devoured." Do you see that shit? Here, listen to the verse 3-8 marked King of Shapes. This one actually has Orcs confronting his own worm, Akka, killing it, and from what I can gather, assimilating the carcass of the worm into something called the Tablets of Ruin. These tablets enable him the taken power we Guardians are all way too familiar with at this point. Finally, the fragment marked Carved in Ruin, verse 3-9, explains the tithing system. It says, "Orcs told the hive, I am the taken king, and here's my law. You thrall, each of you will claw and scream and kill what you can. Take enough killing to feed your worm, and a little more to grow. Tithe the rest to the acolyte who commands you. You, acolytes, lead your thrall in battle. Take enough killing to feed your worm, and a little more to grow, and take the tithe of the thrall you lead. Then tithe the remainder to the knight or wizard who commands you." And thus this moves on up the chain of command. Finally, it gets to the ascendants. Now, the ascendants will be those among the hive who gather enough tribute to enter into the nether world. And they're the ones who pay the tithe to the upper echelon hive, if you will. This is actually the economy the hive live by, where death is the currency for power, and all have to abide to survive. I've seen the mentality in the field. I've often wondered why it seemed like they had no regard for themselves, and, well, now I get it. At any rate, this tithing is what the war priest manages at the highest levels of, and his grimoire data states this. The principle he put upon his brow was slaughter, constant and escalating. The principle he put upon his eyes was victory, which is the last true shape. The principle he put into his hands was tribute to Oryx, the king of taking. Tithing to his lord, that the first navigator might escape the need to kill for subsistence. The worm need that he might use his power to lead the final work. The final work. What's he mean? Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. The blade of famine that we were tasked to bring back ultimately has to do with the necessary tithing system. How Oryx saves himself is by ultimately tithing to this worm. Now remember that, okay? The next piece of the weapon is the Shroud of Iranuk, one of the Death Singers encountered just before the Oryx battle. This tattered fabric piece covering the weapon was requested because of Iranuk's ability to bend reality, I believe. Iranuk is considered the Weaver, in charge of manifesting into reality the destruction Ir Halak has created, referenced in the Ir Halak grimoire entry. She takes in hands the threads of her sister's work, weaves them into the tapestry of Oryx's realm. This shroud, in a similar manner, weaves into our reality the ghostly and seemingly unending 11th round of the weapons magazine. Now, I can't stress enough how much this next part concerns me. The ravenous heart needed to complete the thing, that's the heart of Oryx, or rather, Oryx's exposed worm. We were literally shooting at this thing the whole fight. Take a look at these images. It's hard to argue. I have no idea how much of this thing we've contained within this relatively small rune field. The rune field itself is most likely made from worm spore, given the green hue. Worm spore is, by nature, a dark material. And the other thing that we needed, Hadium flake, it can be imbued with light or darkness, so putting everything together, well, weapons of darkness or sorrow don't generally bode well for the guardians who use them. That's all I'm saying. And it's entirely possible that this Touch of Malice is the weapon of darkness. I mean, look, I know everybody hates the Thorn and the Necrochasm for different reasons, mind you, but this is much worse. You don't believe me? I have two additional pieces of evidence I think I need to share. The first comes from something I found with the Touch of Malice when it was given to me by Eris. It looks like maybe a diary or a journal writing, but here's what she wrote. Here I am, with the power to craft my enemy's darkest secrets, a weapon that could wound them at their core. So what stays my hand? When I behold the interiority of these cold fragments, I see blind, squirming creatures. Every wound they give, they feel also upon themselves. Every bite they tear from the light only deepens, never fills, the raging emptiness behind their terrible mouths. The voices are as loud as ever, my nightmares just as bitter. My coal-black hatred burns as hot, but I feel something else now. Could it be? No, I refuse it. I will build this weapon. Could it be what? Who are these fucking voices? I don't even know how to approach her about it. Her mention of the fragments makes this even more concerning, considering a piece of information I was actually not given, rather I was told about from a fellow guardian. One who had located a fragment I never found. It was marked Insight, and it's verse 5-9 in the Book of Sorrows. In it, Oryx explains specific preparations he's made for the potentiality of his own death, a method, if you will, of continuing on indefinitely. This fragment read, "If I am defeated, I know that I will fall to something mighty." Hey, thanks. Something that craves might, something that loves what I love, which is the deep, a principle and power. Alright, that's not as good. He goes on with, so I will prepare a book, which is a map to a weapon, and my vanquisher will read that book, seeking the weapon, and they will come to understand me, where I've been and where I was going. And they will take up my weapon. They will use it. They will use that weapon, which is all that I am. And armed thus with my past, my future, and my current present, which, of course, is the weapon, a weapon that takes whatever is available, weapon bound to malice. They will mantle me, orcs, the Taken King. They will become me, and I will become them. Each of us defeating the other, correcting the other, alloying ourselves into one omnipotent philosophy. Thus, I will live forever. I'll make sure. Why the fuck wasn't this fragment considered before actually crafting the weapon? Verse 5.9 reveals itself long after the thing was done. I didn't get to see it. Eris interpreted the fragments initially, so one would think she at least had to have considered all this, right? In ways, it almost seems like by killing orcs and his court, we may have satisfied his prophecy. Literally, within the weapon itself lies the future orcs correctly predicted and I fulfill. The final piece actually culminating not in the building of the weapon, but in me fucking getting curious enough and understanding the stupid Book of Staros. He said that. Armed with my past and my future, I guess potentially meaning that we're aligning his perfect form theory within, I'm not sure, but also with his present, the Touch of Malice. My god, Eris, what the fuck did we do here, Three Eyes? Remember, the Hive had a choice, and so do we. That's what Eris said, right? At first I thought this meant that the Hive had a choice to accept the power or refuse it when first presented with the worms and the offer of immortality. But now they're saying that we have a choice as well, but do we? I began using this weapon long before I was made aware of the prophecy behind it. And that was a pretty important piece of information to have before deciding to take it, don't you think? I'm starting to wonder about my relationship with the weapon itself. Anyone that knows me as a guardian also knows that I hate this weapon. I only use it in situations where I absolutely need it. But that's what scares me. I can't part with it. It's, well, it's precious to me. Its value is way too great to just throw away, and I couldn't. But understand that I do get that by using this weapon, Oryx lives on through me, or worse, whatever entity he was sworn to. I don't feel any influence from an outside presence, but if I did, would I even recognize it? Or would I embrace it? Do I believe Oryx is physically still alive? No, I don't. I was there. I watched him die. But Oryx answered to something even greater than himself, and that, I'm pretty sure that thing lives on. For those that find this transmission, I have to ask you, what do you think? Am I right to be concerned? Are you? What does this mean for us moving forward? I gotta look into it deeper. I'll be back soon with more. For the time being, though, CT-1077, signing off.